I've been in the UK for 4 years now, and unlike your aunt who always lied to you about what the diaspora is like, I'm going to tell you what it's really like. Mostly because what's the point of people abroad acting like they've got it, they've figured out the answer, and making a ton of people leave home, sell everything that they have, and come here only to discover that they were being sold a dream. I think we're in the new age now where people are starting to be more honest, more authentic, and just realistic about this immigration thing and this dream of moving abroad, whether it be the UK, the United States, or anywhere else in the world. People are suffering in silence, and I think that's not right. Not for the people back home that are being encouraged to leave everything and come here, and not for the people here in the diaspora, because we're not being honest and we're not being able to confide with each other and just, console each other through this difficult journey. Let's go through all the silent struggles that we go through and just be realistic and raw and just honest. Now, before I moved to the UK, I knew about depression, I knew about loneliness, I knew about anxiety, but I'd never experienced these things, and I've always thought of them as a first world problem, as do most people. But then the level that I was met with was at just unfathomable. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but the level that I met with those things at, the introduction was scary. First of all was the loneliness. I'm going to talk about something that people have never talked about, something that I didn't even know existed: touch starvation. Do you know that as human beings we need touch, and you don't feel it when you are in Zimbabwe or in South Africa or whatever? But I got to a point where, because you're going to work, no one is going to touch you at work, no one is giving you a hug, no one is just caressing your head, no one is holding your hand. You come back home and you sort of just go to sleep and you go back to work. You can go for days in the United Kingdom without anyone touching you, because the spaces are not confined like that. The buses, you can sit on your own in an entire bus. There's just no reason for anyone to touch you as an immigrant. If you're by yourself, this is mostly for people who moved here by themselves, like myself. So I got to a point where I would feel like no one has touched me in the last, not in a weird way, just like a pat on the back, an honest hug. You'd get home sometimes and you're in this new environment, facing these new challenges, and you really need a hug. You just really need people. And you get to a point where you are yearning for a hug. I've always seen people posting going like, I need a hug, but it was just a statement to me. But to actually be in a situation where I physically just wish a stranger could hug me and hold me and tell me that everything's going to be okay, I did not think that existed. And I didn't even know the terms touch starvation before I came here. And the second one that I'm going to talk about is unmet expectations. A lot of people sold their properties, people sold everything to come here. And then they were met with the reality that it wasn't what was being sold. You were not going to get everything that you wanted back as soon as possible. And then now you've sold everything and you're stuck here because maybe you've sold your house, or maybe you didn't even have a house like me. I was living in my parents' house before I moved here. So now you can't go back because you've sold everything to move here. And you've told yourself, most people told themselves they'd never go back. Like myself, I thought I'd never go back. I'm never coming here, this terrible, terrible place. And then you get there and you realize that it's not what you thought it was. You know what I mean? And the money that you thought you'd make is not how much you're making. On average, most people can save maybe 800 if you're really, really serious. Maybe saving 800, if 800, 700, depending on how much you're making. But then you realize that if you really want to save a lot of money, you have to live in such a frugal way that it doesn't even make sense that you are the auntie that's abroad, right? People are expecting you to be the one that's sending money back home. But in reality, you are in Aldi trying to look for the rice that's less than £1 because you are trying to keep your grocery shopping as low as you possibly can. And that's another issue that gets people stuck in the UK as well, is because you meet up with this reality that these people back home expect you to provide. When there's a funeral, they're contacting you. When there's a child that needs school fees, they're contacting you. They want £100 here, £200 there. But the reality is that you don't have that much money. You don't have that money. You are saving pennies. You are trying day and night to make sure that you keep that £10 if you can. But now the people back home don't know. They don't know what your life is like here. They don't know that you're trying to pour water in a sunlight container so that you have something to wash your dishes with. They only see you saying no. If you're the type of person, if you're blessed enough to be able to say no, they only see you saying no when they ask you for money. Some people are not that lucky and they just find themselves giving in to the narrative that they're the rich auntie or the rich uncle, and they keep sending this money back home. And so there's the people that let themselves be taken advantage of, and they're sending that money back home and they're not doing very much for themselves. They end up getting stuck here, not having any investments here, not having any investments back home, and being stuck in terrible, terrible jobs, in back-breaking jobs, and not being able to be happy here or even go back home. Or you end up becoming the person that people don't like back home because you were not sending them money. And therefore, when you do finally settle down here and you're ready to go back home, you're scared because your friends are angry at you, your relatives. Because when you say no to someone or you say, I don't have money, they don't take it that way. They take it as rejection. They're humiliated. They're embarrassed to be around you. And they may not want to hang out with you when you go back home eventually if you decide to retire back home. The other struggle that people face is that they find themselves being stuck in the UK. Those people that sold everything to come here, or you take all your savings to come here, in the first couple of months, in the first year, you're trying to build up those savings. And then from then on, you're starting to chase your permanent residency and you're trying to save up for it. That's like 3,000, 4,000 grand. If you have a family, God forbid, you've got a kid and a husband, that's 3 grand each. That's almost 10 grand just to get settled status. So you essentially come here and you're trying to recover financially from the move of all the money that you've spent to come here. From then on, you're saving money to pay for the residency, the permanent residency for you and your family. So in a way, you're sort of not yet developing yourself. You're just paying to find to find your feet. You're paying to be here in a way. And then from there, there's citizenship, which is also a grand, 2 grand. It's 2,000 thereabout. And if it's 3 people, it's 4 people. That's even more and more. So you're essentially in the first maybe 6 years, maybe 7 years for some, maybe 8 years, especially for people that came as students. You come here as a student and you're just trying to find course after course to pay so that you can stay in the country and be legal in the country until you get your papers. So some people can go for 7 years, 10 years, just chasing papers, chasing a settled status and not really having anything left behind for them to invest, buy a house back home or do anything whatsoever, right? And then for the people that are lucky enough to eventually get to a place where they have enough money to invest, here lies the problem. You are here, right? You've grown up in a situation where the businesses are completely different from Nigeria or Ghana. You don't know how the systems work here. It's not like back home where you could just buy a car and suddenly it's a taxi. You need to, first of all, learn the system. And something that I personally faced head on was you go into a business, you don't know the situation, you don't know the area around you, and you just end up losing everything. Or B, you try to invest back home, but you've lost touch of back home. You may not have people that you trust to run your errands for you, and you just essentially lose touch of what's making money back home. And so you're now just saving money, even though you have that thing of wanting to start a business. You're not being able to start that business. Because we've heard of so many people that have lost entire houses to a sister, a mother, people that have lost a lot of money to their own relatives that they thought they would never betray them. And so you might end up being in limbo, trying to live in both places. You're trying to get the next ticket to go back home and check on your farming project. You're going to try to check on your house or whatever the situation is. And some people do not end up thriving because of that. The people that had really high potential end up not being able to execute good businesses because they're not on the ground or they're moving back and forth. Then the next struggle that I want to talk about is mortgages. Now, the rent in the UK is crazy. Everyone knows about the rent in the UK. If you're trying to be in a 1-bed apartment, you're talking £1,000. On average, you're talking £1,000, and that's before bills if you're trying to be in a studio or 1-bed apartment. And now people start to feel like they're throwing money away by paying rent to a landlord. And so what's the natural next step? The natural next step is that you want a house. But this is not like Zim, where you can buy a stand for £5,000 and build your house and slowly build it while you're living in there. The thing that you have to do, and the only option that's available, because not a lot of people are building houses in the UK, is that you end up getting a mortgage. Now, great, it's appreciating in value. But guess what? Most houses are starting from £150,000. If you're talking Oxford, London, £400,000. And now you have to pay that mortgage. That means you are essentially tied down to that job because you are always at risk of losing your house. You can't even imagine having a month where you sort of bet on yourself or bet on your business and try to do your business full time, because God forbid you miss your payments and you lose your house. Now, you are essentially stuck on this mortgage for like 25 years, 30 years for some people. And so the dream of going back home for people that say, oh, I want to go there for 5 years, 6 years, and then just come back home. You find yourself in a very precarious situation where you have to choose between your house, which is the biggest purchase that you've made, or friends and family and warmth back home in Africa. And then there's the people that have their kids here. Either have your kids here, or you came with your child when she was young and then they grew up here. Those kids get accustomed to the UK. They get accustomed to an easier life. They may not be able to go back to a place where there's no water sometimes and there's no electricity sometimes, or whatever else, whatever struggles that are in your particular country. They've grown up accustomed to this place. Their friends are here, right? And your dream of wanting to go back is not in line with those kids because they don't identify with Botswana. They don't identify with Zimbabwe. How are you going to live and just leave your kids here? Some people do it. Some people do eventually wait for 18 years. Forget about the 5 years that you thought you were going to be here for. Some people do then have to wait for 18 years for that kid to be declared an adult before they can move back home. Great, maybe you are lucky enough to get to that point. But guess what? You've left your kid in Europe, right? So meaning that they're going to have their own child, your grandchildren are not going to have any affiliation to Africa whatsoever. They will not know anything about Zimbabwe, a little bit, but not in the way that a child who grew up in Zimbabwe does. Meaning they won't understand you and things that you expect of them at all. There will be a little bit of a disconnect. A little bit is a understatement. There's going to be a disconnect between you and your grandkids in that there's distance and you're not seeing them as much as possible. You're not able to babysit on a random Wednesday. Two, they just don't understand you. You seem peculiar. You know what I mean? You don't understand the way that they live. You may not understand why they've got a face tattoo. You may not understand why they're having same-sex relationships, and all of that causes a drift between families on top of the distance. I'm gonna put a pause there and film another video as a part 2 to this video so that it's not too long. Please do like and subscribe. Hope to see you next time.